Is the new Y Le Parfum 2025 worth it, or should you go for another one in the line instead? The new Y Le Parfum sure has big shoes to fill considering how good the OG was. So like always, I'm gonna go through what it smells like, performance, usage, mass appeal and more. I'm also gonna compare it to some of the other ones in the line and also give it a rating from 1 to 10. And of course, let you know if I think the new one is better than the OG. So let's start with the price. I paid about 60 bucks for 40 ml of Y Le Parfum. So yeah, it's definitely not a cheap one. When it comes to the bottle design, as you can see, it pretty much follows the design as the previous ones. To me, the bottle is definitely not the most important thing. However, I gotta say, I've always liked the design of the YSL Y line. So before I get to compliments and mass appeal, usage, performance and more, let's start with what it smells like. You got a smooth dose of citrus cutting through, definitely quite a noticeable dose of ginger as well. But what I really get the most in the opening is a bit of aromatic freshness and brightness. A lot of the fragrances in the YSL Y line has a gorgeous and very smooth dose of aromatic freshness and brightness, and I do feel you can find the same thing in here, together with quite a noticeable spicy kick from ginger, and the whole thing has a bit of citrusy freshness to it. To me, this is an intensely fresh opening, but to my nose, this is definitely intense freshness done in a smooth way. And I do think the opening, much like the opening of the other ones in the line, is extremely likable and mass appealing. The more Y Le Parfum moves away from the opening and into the heart of it, the more its freshness it gets a nuance. So I do feel that the freshness of Y Le Parfum is a bit more exciting with more layers to it in the midst, and the whole thing definitely turns more woody, and its woodiness has a soft sort of a piney vibe to it. At this point, at least to my nose, the whole thing starts to get a bit more resonance with a noticeable balsamic feel to it. To my nose, the pine part of Y Le Parfum is definitely quite soft, and I'm actually glad that it's not too intense in this, because pine in fragrances can actually take over the entire thing if it's too intense. So if the opening felt familiar with its mix of spicy, citrusy and aromatic freshness, then I feel Y Le Parfum moves into even more sort of a familiar territory if you compare it to the overall sort of a vibe, feel and scent profile of the line. The more it goes into the drawdown, the more I feel the whole thing starts to shift into something that is more focused on the woody side of it. That spicy, aromatic and citrusy freshness from the opening and the heart of it is definitely a lot softer in the drawdown, and this turns into something that to my nose is mostly woody. It still has that, which to my nose is a soft dose of pine to it. The whole thing is still a bit resinous and definitely still a bit balsamic. The drawdown, at least to my nose, is almost like an extension of the mids, but definitely more woody and instead less fresh. And one way to sort of summarize YSL Y Le Parfum 2025 is that this is basically a woody and fresh scent with a bit of that sort of a fresh out of the shower kind of vibe to it. And it's really that mix of freshness and woodiness that the whole line has that makes this quite familiar. And I do feel the main twist of YSL Y Le Parfum is basically the pine. It brings the whole thing a bit of a twist. However, I do not feel this is something that feels super different compared to the rest of the line. So like a quick comparison with the original YSL Y Le Parfum, I do feel that the OG Y Le Parfum, the freshness of it feels more nuanced. The aromatic side of the OG Y Le Parfum definitely feels more exciting and also in a way a bit more sexy. The OG has one of my favorite aromatic trios ever, sage, lavender and geranium, and that trio in here smells fantastic. The OG Y Le Parfum also has a gorgeous fruity side to it, which I'm definitely not picking up in the new one. So even though these two share a bit of that YSL Y DNA, I also feel there's quite a clear difference between these two. And the same thing could pretty much be said if you compare the new Y Le Parfum to the OG Y Eau de Parfum. I do feel Y Eau de Parfum has a more nuanced kind of freshness to it. It also has a gorgeous fruity side, which I'm not picking up in the new Y Le Parfum. To me, Y Eau de Parfum has quite a noticeable dose of sweetness to it as well, which I'm not getting in this one. And again, much like the previous comparison, this feels like a more woody focused scent with less layers to it if you compare it to this. If anything, it could almost be described like a mix of the OG Y Eau de Parfum, Y Eau de Parfum Intense, but without the sweetness that the OG Y Eau de Parfum has, and with a bigger focus on woodiness that to my nose has a sort of a resinous and balsamic feel that you can't find in these two. And even though they are based on the same core DNA, I do feel that it's actually quite different if you compare it to Y Eau de Toilette. This to me is basically the current most fresh Y. So let's talk a bit about the vibe of YSL Y Le Parfum 2025. I do feel that when it comes to the vibe of it, it has more in common with Y Eau de Parfum Intense, which to me is a more mature and sort of a sophisticated take on that Y DNA. And vibe-wise, I do feel it has less in common with the OG Y Eau de Parfum, which to me goes into something that is more sexy and in a way more energetic. So to me, Y Le Parfum is definitely a classy and elegant take on that Y DNA. When it comes to compliments and mass appeal, like I previously said, the whole line is extremely likable and mass appealing. And the new Y Le Parfum is definitely no different. However, I do think that Y Eau de Parfum is still among some of the top mass appealing ones in the line. Y Le Parfum 2025 still carries that mass appealing DNA of the Y line. However, Y Eau de Parfum, with its sweetness and fruitiness, is definitely a bit more mass appealing. When it comes to performance, I sort of feel Y Le Parfum 2025 performs like most of the other ones in the line. However, I actually get better longevity from the new Y Le Parfum if I compare it to Y Elixir. I feel Y Le Parfum 2025 is basically on the same level as Y Eau de Parfum Intense, but I do feel that the OG Y Eau de Parfum has better and more noticeable projection if I compare it to Y Le Parfum 2025. Overall, when it comes to projection and the scent cloud around you, this, at least on my skin, is a bit above average, but definitely not strong. When it comes to longevity, definitely a bit better than some of the other ones in the line. Overall, I do not think you should expect Y Le Parfum 2025 to be massively different to the other ones in the line, and I do not think you should expect something that is anywhere near beast mode. When it comes to the number of sprays, I usually go with Y Le Parfum 2025. It's anywhere between 6 to 10. When it comes to usage, so like seasons and occasions, this pretty much follows the rest in the line, in that I do feel you can use Y Le Parfum 2025 throughout the year. When it comes to occasions, I pretty much feel the same way as I do about pretty much all the other ones in the line, in that this is something that pretty much works to any occasion. I do feel this works equally well for both casual and formal occasions, so work or school really doesn't matter. However, for date nights, I would probably go with something that has a bit more of a sexy vibe to it. So who is YSL Y Le Parfum 2025 for? Let's make this super simple. If you usually absolutely love that YSL Y DNA, then you most likely enjoy this, because even though this has a bit of a twist to it, I still feel this is quite familiar. If you're someone who always wanted a less fruity and less sweet version of Y Eau de Parfum and Y Le Parfum, then you most likely enjoy Y Le Parfum 2025. And if we switch that around, if you absolutely love the fruitiness and sweetness that some of the other ones in the line has, like the OG Y Le Parfum and Y Eau de Parfum, then you'd most likely miss that part in the new one. I think for most people, there are going to be two deal breakers when it comes to Y Le Parfum. Number one is that this isn't straying too far away from that core DNA, so a lot of people will most likely find this to be too similar to the other ones. The second sort of a deal breaker is definitely the pine, even though I do not feel that this is an overly piney kind of scent. To some people, this will definitely be quite piney. If you usually enjoy fragrances with that fresh out of the shower kind of vibe to them, then this is most likely something for you. And this probably goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. If you usually absolutely dislike that YSL Y DNA and scent, then this is most likely not for you. Let's quickly go through some of the alternatives to YSL Y Le Parfum, and I do feel the main one is definitely Y Eau de Parfum. This to my nose has a more nuanced kind of freshness and also a more exciting mix of spicy, citrusy and aromatic freshness. It's fresh, woody and fruity with a bit of sweetness, and I do feel it's pretty much impossible to go wrong with Y Eau de Parfum. It's extremely mass appealing and definitely a top compliment getter. For a smoother and less sweet version of Y Eau de Parfum, you have Y Eau de Parfum Intense Intense, which to me has a bit more mature and elegant vibes if you compare it to the OG Y Le Parfum. And if you want the freshest take on that Y DNA, then it's definitely the fantastic Y Water Toilette. So what are my final thoughts on YSL Y Le Parfum 2025 and how am I going to rate it from 1 to 10? So I bought it because I like it, and YSL Y Le Parfum 2025 is definitely a good fragrance. To me, this basically takes a bit of that core DNA but moves it in a direction that I feel is more woody. To some people that twist will definitely not be enough, but I do feel this brings something a bit new to the line while still being very familiar. It's definitely not something groundbreaking, but it does have a twist and I do enjoy that twist. However, I do not feel it's as good as the OG Y Le Parfum. And I do feel they should have kept the OG Y Le Parfum in the line. I'm gonna give Y Le Parfum 7.5 to 8 out of 10, something like that. It definitely does not bring the line into a completely new territory or anything like that, but this thing sure smells good. And it does have that versatility that I think is so fantastic about the line. So this is what I want to hear from you. How do you feel about YSL Y Le Parfum 2025? Do you absolutely love it? Do you hate it? Or do you feel it's mid? Let me know in the comments. Please drop a like and subscribe if you absolutely love smelling good. And make sure you check out my other YSL Y reviews over there.